Good evening and welcome to The Naked Entrepreneur. I'm your host, Dr. Sean Wise, Professor of Entrepreneurship and Strategy at Ryerson University. In each episode of The Naked Entrepreneur, we reveal the naked truth behind thriving entrepreneurs' big successes. On tonight's episode, we feature Derek Szeto, a pioneer in online bargain shopping with Clear Sky Media, the parent company to redflagdeals.com and pricecanada.com. Derek Szeto started his first company, redflagdeals.com, at the age of 18 in his parents' basement. He worked on his business throughout university while obtaining his Bachelor of Commerce from Queen's. When faced with the decision at graduation whether to dive into a lucrative job in the corporate world or continue to pursue his passions, Derek decided to go the risky route and continued to grow his business. He then moved into his first office space, a 400 square foot room in the heart of downtown Toronto. The risk paid off. The company continued to grow, and soon Clear Sky Media was acquired by Yellow Page Group for millions. Derek then became the general manager of the Yellow Page Group, but soon, once again, embraced his entrepreneurial itch. Derek is now an angel investor in more than 7 companies and has recently launched his next great venture, Dossier, a service for meeting preparation made easy.
Some ideas are hot, some ideas are not. This is a hot idea. Twitter, using 148 characters to instantly digitally connect with anyone in the real world. This is not. Jersey Shore, 8 characters, not connected to anything real in the world. This is a hot idea. Facebook, efficiently sharing social news with your friends. This is not. Using Facebook to show how drunk you were at the office party. This is a hot idea. Posting your unwanted goods to Craigslist, the world's home of free classified ads. This is not. Posting your sister to Craigslist. Friends don't let friends pursue bad ideas. Find out if your idea is hot or not.
Welcome back to The Naked Entrepreneur. With me tonight, Derek Szeto. Thank you for coming, Derek.
I'm glad to be here.
Derek, I want to start right at the success level. What was the idea behind Red Flag Deals? How did you come up with it?
Sure. So I typically like to work on, problems that I have myself, and this was way back when I was in high school, my last year of high school. And so as a high school student, I didn't have a lot of money, and yet I liked online shopping. So I was doing a lot of research online, looking at a lot of the great deals that U.S. consumers were getting. This was back in the boom just before the year 2000, huge discounts being offered by Microsoft and so forth on rebates for practically any purchases. To really push e-commerce and get revenue up for those companies. So as a Canadian, unfortunately, you can take advantage of a lot of those offers, and I was looking for sources where I could find great Canadian deals. It didn't exist, and so after a couple months of doing my own research and compiling them for myself, I thought I'd just learn a little bit more about the internet and share it with other people. And 12 years later, I was fortunate enough that enough people were visiting the site that we had a substantial revenue, and then we were acquired, and I worked at Yellow Pages Group for a couple of years after that as well.
Well, we're going to get to that whole thing, but I want to go back to the beginning.
Sure.
You're 18 years old. You're living in your parents' basement, figuratively speaking.
Yeah.
You're thinking about going to Queen's to go to university.
Yeah.
But instead of getting an after-school job, you decide to start a business. How did you come to decide that that's the path?
Maybe I was just a bit lazy. I wasn't thinking about it as a business. So if I went to get a quote unquote regular job, then certainly I would have to get out of the house. This way I could stay inside the house. It's a lot easier. But I was just more passionate about this. So at that age, you probably couldn't get that interesting a job. And I wanted to learn a bit more about this internet thing I'd been hearing about. And this was still back in the days where it was like dial-up modems and so forth. And it was just an emerging trend. I've always been interested in technology. So really more than anything else, I just wanted to learn a little bit more. There was no thinking that it would be any sort of business. There was no thinking around, what would it take to grow it? How would I drive revenue? When our first advertiser asked us, or a potential advertiser, what do we charge? We actually had no idea. We didn't do any research. We were surprised by the question even. And so we went back and said, what would you pay?
Which is actually a good way to handle it, to get to know your customer early on. What role do you think passion plays in opportunity selection?
I think it's huge. I think that you're always going to work harder for something that you're passionate about. And if you look in sort of the broader ecosystem, there's going to be people passionate about practically anything. So if you are not the most passionate about whatever you're working on, then they're going to work harder than you. They're going to find better opportunities. And therefore, maybe it's not best fit. So do something that you love because you'll work much harder at it. You'll spend more hours. And as an entrepreneur, I think you can probably expect that you're going to have to spend, more than your 9-to-5 type of job, and becomes certainly more than a career. It's almost like a little bit of a lifestyle, for better or for worse.
So you talk about being lazy, but in the end, you're working harder than you would have at a 9-to-5 after
right, but you're
job.
working and doing something that you love. So it doesn't feel like it might if you were working at a job that you didn't necessarily see a future for you in, or working at a job that isn't that compelling, or you're not learning a lot, because I think as an entrepreneur you're always doing different things. So that's really great and really interesting. So you're just learning all the time. One way people have told me to think about it is you're either working to earn or you're working to learn. So hopefully when you're younger you can have the opportunity to work to learn, and then you can earn later. But sometimes it flips itself around and you're trying to earn money to hit specific goals, and then you can hopefully find a gig that allows you to learn more.
Let's talk about the early days at Red Flag. You said you didn't start off to be a business. You didn't intend to make it a revenue generating. You had a problem. You went out and solved it.
Right.
What was the first sign that you might have found something that was hot?
So it was referrals. So I think this is, nowadays people think about it as like it's validation, it's product market fit. For us, we didn't know any of that at that time. So it was people telling other people that you should go visit, the site, go visit redflagdeals.com. I got a great deal there. And so we got a lot of, growth in traffic just by pure word of mouth. We weren't,
Do you remember a moment in time when you looked at your partners and said, holy beep, we got something going on here?
So the time we got sort of the biggest spike in traffic was when we did a PR piece. We were on City TV, and we got so much traffic that it actually crashed the server. So we didn't, expect or know how to handle that amount of traffic. So, but at that point, we were thinking, wow, okay, well, if there's that many people that are actually interested in what we're doing, maybe there is something there. Now we got to figure out how to handle it all, because we didn't have any experience at that. We didn't know what potential traffic could be like from a TV spot. We just sort of, fell into that particular opportunity. It wasn't like we were aggressively pursuing cities. So when we got sort of third-party validation in that sense, and to me, that type of PR is really just another extension of that word of mouth. They did it and they talked about us because they thought that their readers would get something out of it, that their readers and viewers would be interested, which is a little bit of what we saw even very early days.
So you're talking really about the value to the end user.
Right.
In those early days, what was the value?
So we're a free site, and we always have been and still is today. So the value is we can help you save money. So we were lucky that that's a pretty easy message to deliver. That's a very viral message. That's something that you probably want to tell a lot of people if it works. So our goal was to tell you where you can get the best deals, whether that's online or in-store, for products and services as a Canadian. And that's the niche that we were really looking to fill. at that point in time. There's lots of U.S. sites out there that are helping U.S. consumers, and even some in Australia and the U.K. that was just starting at the time. But for Canadians, because e-commerce was so early in those days, there really wasn't anything. And so we were lucky that we were able to fill in a need quite early on. If we think back, even Amazon.ca hadn't launched yet. So it was pretty bare in the landscape, and at the same time, that allowed me to do, I think, a pretty good job covering the online landscape for sure, even though I wasn't doing it part-time and even though I didn't have a big editorial staff to do it.
Now, you mentioned that it was a 12-year sort of ride. Now, I like to joke that every overnight success usually takes about 12 years.
Yeah.
During that time, you have lots of ups and lots of downs. How do you know when you're down that you're going to come back up? And how do you know when you're up that you're not just moments away from down? In other words, what advice can you give to entrepreneurs who are trying to deal with the roller coaster of emotions?
I've been told, and I truly believe, it's never as good as it seems, it's never as bad as it seems. So you can have a bad day, and everybody will, and you're going to have great days where you might sign an advertising contract for us, for instance, or we got a huge spike in traffic because it's Boxing Week and we did a great job with our SEO. So those are all going to be your sort of peaks and valleys, and they're going to disappear. So, another day will come and you'll have more opportunities. And how do you know whether you're, at the peak, and how do you know when you're at the valley? I don't actually think you can tell. I just think you have to have a sort of a level head, and then over time you can look back on it with some more perspective. So the ability to hopefully just take it in and think about it for at least a few days before you decide that this was the worst day in history ever, or this was as big as we're ever going to get, because you ask yourself those questions naturally. We're at times that we actually had to chase our accounts receivables to be able to bring in cash so we can pay payroll on time and everybody can get their check in their bank. But those days come and go, and hopefully you're able to manage it at that point in time and continue to see progression over a longer period of time. Like a day is never enough to be able to see where you stand.
So let's talk about that, because in retrospect you can see it differently.
Right.
But while you're in it, during those weak moments, during those dips and those valleys, how did you personally deal with it?
My preference was to take some sort of action. So if you just sit there and think about it, it's one potentially very self-defeating, and it's just not a good place to be. So what can you do to hopefully set yourself up for another day, another better day? And if you don't do anything, then you might have more bad days. So I think you have to try and experiment and see what the right answers might be, or at least go down some of these paths. And that's part of what, as an entrepreneur, I think you're doing all the time. You're always trying new things. Hopefully you have some creative solutions to problems. There's, in my mind, 100 million different ways to get to the end goal, but you're going to probably have to try a whole bunch of them before you can figure it out. I think the challenge is, how do you try to manage the risks so that you don't go and try something that could basically take down the whole company.
So I think I hear you talking about continuous development, iterations, trying
Right.
things out with the customers, a sort of lean methodology. Do you remember a pivot in the early days? Do you remember something that you thought was one way and you learned it another way and the business reacted accordingly?
We had our community forum. So Red Flag Deals today is known as Canada's largest bargain shopping community, and that's really what helped accelerate and grow our traffic. But we actually tried running a community before it actually took off, and we launched our forums feature probably less than a year in. But we just did not have enough traffic to sustain it, so we had to par the whole thing back, and we had to focus on our traditional editorial efforts until we got to a certain level, and the discussion almost was naturally generating within itself before we tried the forums again. So I think that one is a little bit more about timing. If you look at some of the other projects that we did, PriceCanada.com being one of them, for instance, we were looking at trying to do what was already done in the US at that time, comparison shopping for computers and electronics, where you could see what's the best price for that video card or video game or DVD that you wanted to buy. And it was a very successful model in the US that we tried to bring out to Canada. But over time, we at best ran it as basically a break-even proposition. The challenge being there wasn't enough mass in the market, not enough retailers selling those particular products to make the comparisons that useful to the consumers. So that was always a product that, we tried to, tweak in a couple of different ways, but we never got it to the point where it was a huge, huge success. We got it to the point where it was a break-even proposition.
You're a few years in, you're in college, you're at Queen's, it's working, it's growing, you're starting to get some traction, some referrals, some third-party evidence. Most people at that point think, now that I have some proof, I should go get funding. Did that ever occur to you?
I wasn't that smart. So I think in our sector, in hindsight, now that I think about it and now that I've done a little bit of angel investing, I think it was a tricky proposition for us in the sense that we were focused purely on the Canadian market. So traditionally, as an angel or as an investor in general, you obviously want to go after larger markets. So that might have been already a big strike against us. Further down the road, when we were able to reach more critical mass and we got a couple million unique visitors, then people started asking us if we wanted investment. But that time, we were already quite profitable and comfortably profitable that we didn't necessarily need their funding to go and invest continually in the business. So I think the short answer is I didn't think about it because I was just naive and didn't know a thing about raising money. So if somebody approached us, then we would have thought about it. But by the time they did, it wasn't relevant for our scenario.
So timing is key.
Yeah.
Well, timing on this show is key as well. We're going to have to break for a commercial. We'll be right back with Derek Szeto.
My name is Lindsay Goodchild. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Green Gauge.
Jonathan Trump, founder and creative director of Tokyo Mouse Inc.
Mark Coleman, the co-founder and president of WebRocker.
No matter what the idea, be it product or service, profit or nonprofit,
Ryerson provides education, resources, and funding to help start and expand your businesses.
Relationships with other entrepreneurs can be a huge factor in your success. You may see that rock, and is it a diamond or not? How would you know? Talking with other entrepreneurs can help you know.
Welcome back to The Naked Entrepreneur. I'm Dr. Sean Wise, and with me, the founder of Red Flag Deals, Derek Szeto. Derek, I want to pick it up where we left off.
Sure.
You didn't take external funding, so you did it alone. You went the bootstrap method.
Way, yes.
What was that like? Were there any days when you sort of thought that was a bad idea?
I think obviously you maybe can't go as fast as if you had external funding. So there was a point in time where we looked and said, okay, now we're decently established in Canada. Can we look and develop something in the U.S. market? Can we look at other mostly English language countries and cities where we could do something similar to what we did and maybe build upon that success? And if we had more funding, we maybe would have took those projects seriously. We sort of dabbled a little bit with the U.S., but never got anywhere. And a lot of these U.S. companies were, like us, quite profitable and could plow in good resources to continue to build their business. So I think taking on external funding with a view to potentially take what we'd done internationally could have been an interesting opportunity. And maybe there would have been a ripe sort of point in time where somebody could have reached out to us and said, why don't we do that? But again, I was too naive, too stupid to be able to think about that at that time. It wasn't something that I had, great grand visions to be the biggest deal site anywhere. We were focused on serving the Canadian market, and I think we did that well, but we certainly could have tried to do a bit more.
Do you think there's ever a downside to accepting external funding?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you have external stakeholders, they certainly have a say in what decisions are that you make. I mean, the clearest one is they certainly want a return on their money. So when you bootstrap it, you can decide if and when you want to sell, and some people, and it's totally fine to build a successful business and run it as a lifestyle business, or just that one that helps you generate ongoing dividends and income without the intention to really ever sell. So those type of opportunities obviously are not a good fit for investors typically. So there might be a bit of a clash at some point in time. So it really depends on your business. So if you take on external money, you have to understand what their expectations are, and you have to believe that you can certainly meet those expectations. Otherwise, you can certainly bootstrap. In this day and age, it doesn't take a lot to get up and running. It takes some money to scale in many instances, but especially if you're looking at the web and you're building web apps or mobile apps, people can get out with 25, 50,000 to try to get some traction. You can charge customers direct if you're valuable enough in terms of a service offering. So there's lots of great success stories of companies that are just private that you probably don't. You never hear about them in the press at all, but they're making their customers happy. Their customers are paying some sort of fees, and they're happy as well. So that's totally cool.
You mentioned about the acquisition. So the story ends well. You get acquired for some millions of dollars, and it allows you to go on to be an angel investor. But let's take a step back.
Sure.
What do you think it takes to be acquired?
So for us, one of the things that we looked at, we had an advisory board, and one of the guys on our advisory board was a guy by the name of Chris Carter, who I'm working with now at Canada Cafe, and he had a business called Thin Data and Email Marketing that he sold to Transcontinental. So having a strong sort of advisory board and people surrounding you that can give you some of that advice, was key for me. As to what it took in our scenario or what it takes more generally, it certainly helps to have some sort of market leadership, which we did, even if we were in a very narrow segment, arguably, of Canadian and shopping deals. We're still focused on shopping. So anybody who's coming to our site typically is interested in shopping, and that creates a whole wealth of opportunities on the advertising side. There's a lot of buyers out there that are purely financial buyers. They'll look at your P&L and say, you're generating this much revenue and this much EBITDA, and therefore I can pay this much for your company. So that's one way to look at it. But the other things I think are more intangible are some sort of process, some sort of productization of what you do versus a pure service offering, which a lot of people don't necessarily believe can scale. Having a strong growth track record as well, a plan to move yourself forward, because acquirers are always looking to buy you with the goal of improving or growing what you have. They don't want to acquire you so that you can do the same thing that you've always been doing and not show any growth. So being able to demonstrate all of that as a track record really helps.
Well, you did demonstrate that. You did get acquired. It put a few extra dollars in your genes, you and your family. And now you've changed. You've gone from being an entrepreneur to being an investor. How does it feel to cross that road, to go to the dark side, to be on the other side of the table?
I hopefully haven't changed too much, so I still feel like at the end of the day, I'm an entrepreneur first, and I'm lucky enough to be an investor now that I had one success, certainly not as big as some of the other guys you've had on the program. But I do think that angel investors like myself, a lot of time they aren't investing, and I've actually looked at this area because of one of the projects that I'm working on. They're not necessarily investing purely for returns. A lot of them invest because they want to help people. It might be colleagues that they've worked with. It might be industries. It might be they want to help the sector of internet companies in Toronto and grow that ecosystem. So it's different, but hopefully I can bring some of the entrepreneurship assets that I had over. And at the end of the day, I still want to be able to get back onto the entrepreneurship side. But angel investing is something that I want to always do as a part of my overall portfolio of activities.
Why? Why do you want to take your hard-earned money and put it into unknown entrepreneurs when you yourself said you might have another idea? I know you're secretly working on one. Right. Why be an angel investor? Why take that role?
So I think it's one interest, to learning. So by being on the other side, as you sort of said, I've learned a lot just going through the process. So now if I went, with another company on the second time around and wanted to raise funds, hopefully I've learned a little bit based on what I'm looking for. To be able to be more effective and efficient in doing that. So just the process of looking at companies, looking at their business models, talking to entrepreneurs, looking at what their prospects and opportunities are, the different markets and segments. I've just learned so much in that entire process that if I didn't invest, that I wouldn't be able to do that. So that, I think, is number one. Second is, for future funding opportunities for the companies that I run, I just want to have that base and that understanding. And then, of course, I want to help certain entrepreneurs in the ecosystem. So my investments almost, I think, entirely are based in Canada, and so I'm investing in other Canadian companies, which I certainly feel good about. And at the same time, I'm just having great conversations with them and making great contacts and networks. So there's just so many added benefits. And the one that's low on the list, but I think still important for people, is obviously you want to generate a return. So if you're doing this activity and you're not looking to generate a return, then I think of it more as a charity. It's not investing. So for me, I still want it to be a part of my investment portfolio. So with a portfolio view, a certain proportion of my assets should be allocated to angel investing with the aim of returning money on those funds, not just throwing them everywhere and not making anything.
I know we have some mutual friends. So Roger Wilson at the Business Development Bank of Canada, whenever you ask him, how do you look for companies? What do you look for in them? He always says, I look for the management, I look for the magic, and I look for the market. Matt Golden, who we both know from Golden Ventures, he talks about team and technology and traction, which is almost the same as management, market, and magic. What do you look for? If I looked at the 7 deals I've seen so far out of your portfolio, what do they all have in common?
Sure. So, Matt, like you said, when I talked to Matt, he told me he looks for team, he looks for traction, he looks for market. I think that's a pretty good summary of a lot of things that I'm looking for as well. So
let's talk about those one at a time.
Sure.
When you say team, what do you mean?
A team that has some proven ability to deliver, and by deliver doesn't mean they have to have 1 million users or anything like that, or even revenue. So they have to be able to at least deliver a prototype. They have to have some sort of ideally experience in their sector or domain knowledge. That's very important. And that's what I would look for. Commitment certainly to what they're doing, an interest and passion for what they're doing, the ability to problem solve, because that's how you're going to see
domain knowledge, problem solving. Good.
Market is, as an angel investor, of course, you want big returns, and you're going to have companies that are basically end up at zero, and you're going to have companies that are big hits, and those are really where you're going to get the return. So it's important that they're hopefully playing in a space where there's a big market and a big market potential if they execute properly. That doesn't mean that everybody's, of course, going to be a home run, but if they do it right, that you get a good return on your investment, and it's sort of the rising tide floats all boats type of theory.
If you're in an industry that's growing so fast, even if you're second or third, you're going to succeed.
Exactly, and that can actually, cover up some of the problems that you're having as an individual company. But overall, portfolio view, again, that's generally going to be viewed as a very positive thing.
So that's team and that's market. Let's go with traction. What do you look for in a traction?
So traction is people using it, people coming back to it. So I think there's sort of, 2 buckets. One is if you're a consumer web, then it's more about how many registered users, are they coming back often, how much time are they spending on the site, and so on. And then if you're more B2B or direct revenue focused and you're selling subscription, for instance, what's your conversion rates, how much revenue are you generating, what's the growth rate of monthly billings over time, that type of thing. That all helps to try to screen investments, but that's not to say that every investment you're going to get all 3, because typically I would say you probably don't. If it was so great, then they would probably be able to raise, Series A money, for instance, that you would never even get into. So ideally, you can maybe get, 2 of the 3, or you get 2.5 of the 3, or you get 2, and you can sort of see that third one's coming, and that is sort of your opportunity as an angel investor.
Do you think angel investors can bring more than just money?
Oh, absolutely. So I think, on the other side, if you're raising money, you should look for angels that can add value. Certainly angel investors will have a network that they can tap into, and some of those guys might be other investors, but some of them might be potential customers for your product or service. And getting early customers and customer references is very, very important, especially right now where the market is very traction focused. So getting guys on board that could be strategic as well as, money guys.
So smart money is more than just cash. It's having ability to introduce you to customers or distributors or advisors.
And,
to be able
they
to
can be advisors as well and so forth. So if it was just cash, arguably there's so many different places that you could get it. One way or another, you could probably figure it out. And even if you had to just, loan money from people that and some people do that to get started, but, getting the value of their knowledge and their network and their insight just gives you so much more. And that's what you should be looking for on the other side as an entrepreneur.
What about things that cause you concern? Are there red flags? Are there red herrings? Are there things that once you hear, it's hard to continue focusing? So for me, for instance, our financials are conservative. If you only get 2% of the market, it'll all be great. To me, that just shows a very low level of business acumen. And it may mean that there's just too much mentoring that's required. What turns you off on an investment?
So I think you're actually touching on this coachability aspect. I think so, especially if you're early and you're investing in a seed deal. A lot of these companies are going to shift and just change over time before they figure out what they actually want to do. So the ability to be able to coach them. I mean, it's one-to-one advice. It's second to be able to handle advice and be able to make something out of it. So the ability to take in what people are saying and learn from that and follow up. The coachability aspect is key. If you can't do that, then it's almost like you don't necessarily believe that they can change and adapt as the world changes, as the market changes. So I think that's one. The other one that I've caught me in the past, there was one deal I was looking at, and I was going to give them a check, but it actually came down to legal. So them not sort of understanding, what the legal parameters were, and it was just, basically one clause in there that they ultimately changed after the fact. But for me, it was just hard in terms of the process of dealing with their the legal acumen or their willingness in that case to understand my perspective as well. So it was less about what the end result was. It was more about the process that we went to get there. It didn't make me that comfortable and that confident in giving them the money in the end.
See, to me, that's a shame. Because a quick Google search will find, Venture Deals by Brad Feld.
And that's a great book. I totally recommend that.
And to get past these things, like to not reach out and cover the things that you can know and only be left with the unknown, says something about the business.
Absolutely.
Right? It says
so that
something
makes it makes it hard, to get the deal done. And you have lots of people that are obviously pitching opportunities. So that's one of the filters is if you can't get past the initial investment, what's your hope of being able to do that down the road when things get more complicated? Because arguably, like you said, there's lots of resources out there, and that's probably something that you can, just narrow down and kill within a single call. But for us, it was just something that nagged for a long time, and the process of getting through it, wasn't the experience that I certainly wanted it to be.
Are there any other signals that you've become wary to look for?
I think projections, of course. Projections, I think, at that stage are, close to useless, we'll say, because there's just no certainty in it. And so I hopefully can, find entrepreneurs that understand risk and present what in a balanced way. I don't want somebody that just says, everything's going to be great and good. I want to see, what the risks are. I want to see people present me with their competitors. That's something else that a lot of times I don't see. It's just a sunny deck of this is all the cool stuff that we're doing in a vacuum. I want to know about what else is happening in their marketplace as well.
One of our other guests called it, I expect my investments to be reasonable, not right.
Right.
There's no way to project to 5-year projections. But if you think that you're going to have 1 million customers paying $10 and not have a fleet of people taking the money, then you've got an issue. Meaning that you can tell from the financial statements the acumen of the people writing them.
Exactly.
If they only have a CFO and no accounts receivable clerk, maybe they've never had receivables.
Exactly.
Maybe they never had to chase receivables.
Exactly.
What advice would you give to people who are coming to get your money, say in our student audience?
So I'm fairly easy to access. So, typically the best way is referrals, and I think we've talked about that offline as well. But in this day and age with like AngelList and LinkedIn and so forth, You can access angel investors. People are putting, on their titles, and they're registering with AngelList and saying, I'm doing X number of investments per year at these rates. So they're inviting you to contact them. So I do like entrepreneurs that are, aggressive enough to go and contact people, whether it works out or not, because I think that's certainly going to be part of the process, and you're going to get a lot of rejections. So don't worry about that so much. And then really the three things that we talked about in terms of showing that there's some sort of team behind it, that you have some sort of traction, and that this is an interesting market. And further to that, like, how do you guys differentiate from everything else that is there? How do you prove to me that you might come out on top versus all the other guys that are in that space?
Were you always entrepreneurial? If I call up your
Sure.
mom or your dad, are they going to tell me that not only at age 5 were you building Legos, but you were renting them out to other kids in the neighborhood to play with? How did it all start with you?
So my parents, I think, had a lot to do with it, but I probably wasn't as entrepreneurial as some of the other guests that you might have had. I was maybe a bit late in that sense. I played a lot of video games. I played with a lot of Lego, but I never rented any Lego out. So for me, it was really the experiences where my parents were actually both entrepreneurs. They had a fast food restaurant at Jackson Square in Hamilton, a Chinese fast food restaurant that they ran for many, many years as I was a child. So I was used to, on weekends, sort of running errands for that business and going and buying, noodles for it, and it almost being like a 24/7, job, at least in terms of awareness. So that prepared me well.
Is that where you learned that entrepreneurship is a life, not a 9-to-5 career? Is that where you saw that for the first time?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think for the most part as well, I don't view it as a pure negative, right? That's just the way people choose to live their lives as an entrepreneur, and they're doing, activities that they will obviously hope to further their business, and they're in many cases, happy doing that. It wasn't that we, had the chore of going to pick all this stuff up. It would be, just one of the activities that we did as a family, and then we can go and have dinner out at Chinatown or wherever it was. So yes, but not from any sort of negative light.
Okay, let's go back in time. Let's
Sure.
think about those early days at the restaurant. What lesson do you think you took away from all of that? What's the one thing that kind of sticks out in your mind that, but for that experience, you wouldn't think this way?
I think a lot of it is a process. So, they had one single restaurant, storefront, and for them, they had to be there in order for it to operate. So, we couldn't do long vacations or anything like that. And this was something that I faced early days at Red Flag Deals. I had to be there because I didn't have the money to hire people. So over time, what we tried to do was build more process. So if you think about a single restaurant, family-owned versus a chain or a franchise, the difference really is in the process and the systems. And the process and the systems, in that case, really allows them to scale. So, the one thing I learned absolutely is that you have to have that process and that system in place. Otherwise, you're not going to scale.
People make that mistake often. Before they've settled how much it costs to get customers, how much we should sell for, they want to grow.
Right.
They want to scale up. So what you're saying is you got to nail the model first.
Right, and there has to be a model behind it, right? So I think a lot of the small businesses, this is where they get stuck. So they're doing well for that one location, and they're probably profitable and bringing good revenue. The question is, if they have the desire to make it a multi-store or make it something bigger, it's what is the process that they have to put in place to manage, quality, for instance, and how do they train people so that they can execute that? How do they, build the business without being an integral part of all the operations of the business?
Sounds like you learned a lot there.
I did, absolutely. I didn't realize it at the time. I think it's just one of those things that you experience it while you're there, and in some way sort of plants a little seed in you, and then later it sort of comes out for better or for worse.
Now, you talked about the value advisors provided to you when it came to selling your business.
Right.
And I know that you are a good advisor yourself, having some of our students work with you. Where can entrepreneurs go to find advisors? How should they establish that relationship? And what should they be honestly seeking from it?
So I think school is actually a great place to find advisors. So one of my advisors for Red Flag Deals and Clear Sky Media is Ken Wong from Queen's University. So he had a marketing background, and I took one of his marketing courses, and one of the things that he taught me is this whole idea of a consideration set. So if people think about a problem that they want to solve and finding the best deal, you need to be 1, 2, or 3 in their consideration. Otherwise, you're never going to get there. So for us, that was something that we always strove to, is to be first in the consideration set for anybody thinking about deals in Canada. So start with your sort of natural networks. If you're part of a school community, if you're a part of an organization or a club, there could be people that would fit as an advisor.
What should you be looking for to make that?
So I mean, people that are willing to give you time. They're willing to give you honest advice. So it's not always going to be rosy. So they need to be able to tell you, what do you need to fix? What's wrong with what you're doing? And that type of thing is just super important. If you can't get honest advisors, then you're not. There's no value in having them on board. Industry experience and contacts. So I think a lot of the same things that we talked about that you're looking for in an investor. The advisor is similar. They're an investor of mostly their time versus funds, but what you're looking to get out of them, I would say in many cases is quite similar.
Well, I can tell you we're getting quite a lot out of you. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking with Derek Szeto, and we'll be right back after this. Welcome back to the Naked Entrepreneur. Derek, I only have a few more minutes before I have to turn it over to the students to ask questions, but I want to ask you this question on their behalf.
Sure.
What advice do you have to students who are where you were just a few years ago?
So I think students actually have a natural advantage when it comes to entrepreneurship, and I would encourage them first and foremost to start young. When you're young, you actually don't have a lot of the responsibility. You don't have kids. You don't have relationships that you necessarily need to take care of and spend as much time with at that age. So you have opportunity to go and pursue, what you're passionate about. So start young and follow the road of something you're passionate about, and that hopefully will turn into a business. And even if it doesn't, I think you'll learn a lot along the way. And these are skills and experiences that you can actually bring to an employer as well, even if you don't end up being an entrepreneur. Having just gone through that whole process will be valuable on the other side.
And Derek, I think that's great advice. And I think our students are really going to benefit from it. And now we'll have a chance to hear what they have to say. Now it's time for student questions.
Hi, Derek. Thank you for coming and talking with us. My name is Benjamin Daniels, and I have a question about passion. If you're an aspiring entrepreneur and you haven't quite found that passion or that niche that you want to pursue, do you think it's important to just start with something and start making those mistakes and getting experience? Or should I wait until I really have that passion?
That's a great question. I think you probably have a lot of passions maybe that you don't think of as a sort of business opportunity. So I would look at where do you spend your time outside of your commitments, and whether that's school or a job and so forth. So usually within the areas that you spend most of your free time, you'll find something that you're passionate about and try to build some sort of business around that. If that doesn't work, you can certainly start and just try to fumble your way and figure out what works or what doesn't. I just think it's going to be a lot easier if you follow your passion and do something in that field, even if it's just slightly related.
Hi, thanks for coming by to talk to us. I'm Julia, and you've got everything. I'm just wondering why you decided to start a new business.
So I'm curious, I guess, and maybe I just feel like I need to learn. And so I'm right now working on a new company called Dossier, and it's really around knowing the people that you're going to meet. And this is a problem that I certainly had back in my days at Yellow Pages and even at Red Flag Deals. So I'm doing it because it's a problem that I'm passionate about. It's a problem that I want to solve, and I think I can help a lot of people have more productive meetings. And I'm not ready yet to sort of sunset and retire, and I wouldn't know what to do with my time. So I'd rather put my energy to work in a new business and try to make something work.
Hey, Derek. My name's Gwen. Thanks so much for your time today. I'm wondering if you could give yourself one piece of advice, yourself when you're 18 years old, starting your company. What advice would you give to your younger self?
So this is a really interesting one. I mean, if I was being a little bit cynical, I might say that when I do the transaction, maybe take less stock and more cash up front, or maybe invest my money in Google or in Apple versus a Yellow Pages group. But really, looking back, I think it was a little bit of what we talked about before, looking at a potential U.S. opportunity, because that could have potentially been much bigger than what we did with red flag deals, and being able to pursue it, because we did have a window in time where other companies were able to make it work and create sort of new shopping experiences that we possibly could have been the ones creating it. So looking back, you maybe be a little more aggressive than we were in terms of investing in the business, or even taking on outside funding to try new and different things.
Any other regrets?
The name Red Flag Deals is a bit long, so as a domain and as something that is easy to market, doesn't always fit everywhere. So if I could go back and make it shorter and more compact, I certainly would have done that. I think work-life balance, of course, is another one that's always been tricky. So even hiring some key staff earlier in the process, a salesperson, for instance, or a CTO earlier. We got there eventually, but we probably could have saved ourselves a lot of headache and been able to grow faster.
Well, speaking of getting there, we've got to the end of the show, and I want to thank you so much
thank
for
you
coming
for having me.
and for
Appreciate
being
it.
so honest. Ladies and gentlemen, Derek Szeto.
Thanks.
We'll be right back after this. Tonight our guest was Derek Szeto. Together we talked about creating a business around your passions, taking the leap of faith into entrepreneurship, and embracing the uncertainty principle. From all of us at Ryerson University, I'm Dr. Sean Wise. Thank you for watching, and good night.